It is Monday, June 29th, 2020. I'm here talking to someone who has been pretty much on the forefront of pretty much every major movement in Atlanta. He is quite possibly one of the busiest people in the state right now. His name is Chris Bruce. He is with the ACLU of Georgia. In particular, Bruce, for people who've already members of the newsletter, you have already had two talks with Bruce, two live chats with Bruce, both one concerning the shooting death of Ahmaud Arbery, and then the other was about the reopening of Georgia by Governor Brian Kemp. Bruce has worked on a lot of things throughout the state, in particular this year with the ACLU. He has been a legal observer during the ongoing protests here in Atlanta, on top of just everything going on with the Ahmaud Arbery case. So I'm talking to Bruce today about, in particular, a couple pieces of legislation that just got passed on the last day of session, which for you people who don't know, Georgia's session, like many states, had to be postponed due to COVID-19. We picked up in June. And as a result, there was a lot of bills and things that either didn't get picked up or did get picked up, and some things at the last minute that changed. So we're going to talk about two of the bigger ones first, and we'll get into a couple smaller things next. But first, I want you all to once again give a hand clap for Chris Bruce of the ACLU of Georgia. All right. And so there we go. For you all who can't see that, he's drinking out of his Hawks cup. And so in particular with his, I want to actually jump straight into it, which is one of the reasons why we're talking today is that the governor, today, correct me if I'm wrong, yesterday or today, signed House Bill 426, which is known as the Hate Crimes Bill of Georgia. It was a bill in which received a lot of controversy. It was a bill that was basically dead for a long time and only became revived as a result of the Ahmaud Arbery case. And so I want Bruce to kind of talk through what's happened on 426 and where we stand on that right now.
Well, I'll tell you what, I'm looking up right now when it was signed into legislation. I believe it was last week. Let's see.
Yeah, it was Friday, correct? Like Friday afternoon?
I'll be honest with you, everything's a blur right now. So
yeah,
I'm about to tell you, it's pulling up right now. And now I can go over the legislative record, kind of what you were alluding to.
Right. And so 426 in particular, the reason why a lot of people were really concerned is that, unlike other things, while Bruce is looking that up, is that 426, the hate crimes bill was actually passed last year. We actually had legislation come out the House last year that basically died on the vine. We had another one that came out this year. And then before COVID-19, it was also dead on the vine. The thing that's been interesting is that under the current leadership of Brian Kemp and also Lieutenant Governor Jeff Duncan, there seemed to be not a big push, as well as not a big push from state Senate Republicans on even pushing this bill through. At the point in time, Georgia was one of only 4 places in the U.S. that did not have a hate crimes bill on the books. And with everything said about a lot of other states, in particular, Georgia particularly touts his record of being good for the state, good for business. This is just one of the few black eyes that Georgia's had. And it just passed recently. And if it wasn't for people like Bruce being a legal observer, or all the activists online and in real life down in South Georgia in regards to the Ahmaud Arbery case, and such the level of notoriety of that case, I'm not sure this bill would have got passed in the first place. So Bruce is going to talk to us more about that one in particular, than another bill as well that is related to that is equally controversial. So Bruce, are you ready?
Yeah, and I'll tell you what, how about I do this? I'll share my screen with you to tell you what I'm looking at, to kind of bring this up together. Oh, host disabled participant screen share.
Oh yeah, I'm sorry about that. Hold on. Are you trying to screen it now?
Yes.
All right. So you should be able to share it now.
Okay. Boom. This is the Georgia General Assembly's website, where you can follow all your bills that are happening down at the Georgia General Assembly. This is the Senate Bill HB 426. Whenever you're reading legislation, first thing you always want to do, and the website goes well with how you should read everything. Look at the sponsor first. See who's the sponsor of a bill. This bill is Chuck Frustration. If you know anything about Representative Frustration, you know that he is a Republican who's also the chair of the Judiciary Committee. So you know that this bill would have been put into the Judiciary Committee, and you can see that right here under sponsored by, under sponsored and Senate by, and then you go to committees, Judiciary, non-civil. So this bill literally went through his committee. So you know it was going to pass, because if it's my bill and I own the committee, more than likely it's going to go through. You have the timeline that happened when this bill first was introduced. It was introduced on February 21st of 2019. So what that means is this was what we call a carryover bill into the next session. We were in the 2020 session. Because it didn't pass in 2019. It passed the House in 2019, but it took till the Senate, and like you were saying before, Jared, there was a lot of public angst towards it. So there's a lot of other organizations and groups that have been working on this bill, not just this bill, but several other hate crimes bill for decades, specifically because Georgia's previous hate crimes bill was struck down for being ambiguous of aid by the Georgia Supreme Court. So years later, you finally have a hate crimes bill in the state of Georgia. The question is, if you go deep into it, what does hate crimes really mean? What does this mean towards what happened in the Ahmaud Arbery case? What does it happen towards going further along in the future of Georgia, reporting, and who is this going to be used against, or who is this going to be protecting? Those are really the questions that you really need to ask your listeners as far as where do we go from here?
Okay. And so now I want to get into the bigger portion of the controversy, which is maybe I don't want to spoil it, but you could tell people why all of a sudden were people so up in arms over the last 2 weeks or so about this particular bill?
About hate crimes? So yeah. There's more of a, like I said, hate crimes isn't new. I've been in the legislature since 2017, and I've been talking about hate crimes since then. I believe that with all the recent protests and a lot of people really digging into what kind of Georgia, what kind of nation they want to be in, what happened with Ahmaud Arbery, the first thing that people were really talking about is hate crimes bill that needed to be passed. Now, you'll hear it from different people about, was that the proper response to Ahmaud Arbery's murder? That's really in the eye of the beholder. But we all know that Ahmaud Arbery was murdered. It was an unjustified murder, and that these individuals are now facing the judicial system right now. They will not be charged with a hate crime because there's no hate crime under the statute, but they could possibly be charged with a hate crime on the federal statute because you do have a Shepard-Byrd Hate Crime Act that the federal authorities are investigating the case.
Hold on, can you pause and let people know what that actually is? Because I'm pretty sure nobody's going to know what you're talking about on that one.
The Shepard-Byrd Hate Crimes Act?
Yeah, and then even like the difference between the state and federal, why they would, not get prosecuted on the state side from what you're saying, and then also the federal.
Right. So that's a good point. So you are a resident of the state of Georgia, which means that you are under Georgia law, but you are also a citizen of the United States, which means you're under federal law. So you have state law and federal law. State law right now, let me see. This doesn't say when this goes into effect, so I think it goes into effect July 1st. Typically, that's when bills go into effect, unless it says in there. So this bill, hate crimes did not exist in Georgia. It's a state law. They just didn't have it, the absence thereof. So the McMichaels who killed Ahmaud Arbery, or anyone else who commits a hate crime, you can't charge them under a state law because there is no state law of hate crimes. On the other hand, the federal government, which has a Hate Crimes Act and the Shepard-Byrd Hate Crime Act, I believe that was passed in 2000. really outlines between if you had a motivated bias of committing a crime against certain individuals, similar to hate crime laws that everybody sees across the state, then the federal government can come in and prosecute you for a hate crime. And that's under a federal court system compared to your state court system. So right now, again, the McMichaels are facing murder charges without a hate crime statute. The McMichaels could be facing murder and a hate crimes law under the federal government's hate crime law. So they'll be in two different jurisdictions. Same thing happened in South Carolina, where the individual walked into the church and killed 9 Black people, and then they took him to Burger King. Yeah. He was charged in the South Carolina law. He was found guilty, and I think he was sentenced to death there. And then in the federal law, which is pretty much unprecedented, they actually sentenced him to death as well. I may be wrong about that. I might have to look it up. But I believe last time I checked, he was sentenced to death under both the state and federal law.
Gotcha. Okay. And so now the bigger issue is that people had an issue with the hate crimes law in particular. This was not in the final bill, mind you, but there was something that was tacked on by Lieutenant Jeff Duncan. It's spelled Geoff if you guys are going to look him up. But that particular law, there was one thing in particular. One, this was not consulted with any, I believe not, he didn't consult the ACLU, I'm correct, right? When he drafted his version of the bill?
Oh, no. No.
Okay.
So here's, and might as well get this out of the way. ACLU was kind of more behind the scenes on this type of bill.
Okay.
We were saying that we were in favor of it or against it. And I can go into the philosophy about why the ACLU does things like that.
Okay, I think you should.
No, I did not have any conversations with the Lieutenant Governor's office.
Okay. And I'm glad you corrected. You let me know about that. Then I do want to get into the philosophy on the ACLU in regards to that. But the issue that a lot of people had was there was this protection that was added on at the last minute, and it was done by Lieutenant Governor Jeff Duncan's office. That particular add-on was adding a protected class for first responders in particular. So for people who don't know what that is, that would be your EMTs, your firefighters, your paramedics, and more importantly, police officers to this protected class of people. There was a big uproar, particularly from the NAACP of Georgia, who, upon knowing this, launched a full-on social media attack against it because essentially all the other groups that are protected by the hate crimes law are groups of people who, for one reason or another, are typically born into that particular class. An officer is a profession. And so that was one of the bigger contentious points that was moving online, as well as this overall police rhetoric that's been going around from a lot of people, particularly on the right, about the need to protect law enforcement, and law enforcement are heroes, and kind of this notion that hate crimes could happen to officers. And so we're not going to get into that. That's a different conversation. I'll have one with the former officer later on this week, and I hope you guys listen to it. But can you explain to people why in particular that addition of officers were added and then why it was taken out?
Well, I can't specifically speak towards Lieutenant Governor's motivations. I mean, you have to ask him for that. But I know in a time when you have the American public demanding police accountability for the misconduct that police officers are having all across the nation, that they've been having since they've been implemented in the United States culture, the worst thing to do is to add in a protection clause for police officers under a Hate Crimes Act, when certain police officers are the ones who are committing hate crimes. Not only that, but police officers are the most protected class in the United States, especially in Georgia. Every year there's a bill that goes into back the badge or back the blue and everything else. And let's be real, police officers do play a role within our society. What kind of role that they play is really determined upon you, but it was unnecessary, and I would say an insult to put police officers in the hate crime statute.
Okay. And subsequently, the bill was removed. The officers were removed from that particular bill. But then there was a new bill that arose, which was House Bill, correct me if I'm wrong, House Bill 838, right? That also passed.
Correct. House Bill 838.
Okay.
The one thing I do want to say about House Bill 426, the Hate Crimes Act, is that there was a major portion that the ACLU was in favor of, and that was mandatory reporting. And the reason why I'm pointing that out is originally it wasn't in the bill. And two, if you do not have the reporting of hate crimes, then you really don't know what problems are really arising. So it's very concerning to know that there are certain, back in 2018, there were only 9 jurisdictions in the state of Georgia that said that the hate crime happened within their area. 9. There are over 470 police reporting jurisdictions in the state of Georgia. 9 versus 470. So we know there are other things that are going on out there. This bill now requires police departments to investigate and report certain types of actions or violations of the law as a hate crime. And the other good part about that is this reporting goes to your local U.S. Attorney's Office, which also gets shared by the FBI, so they can find other places such as white extremist groups who may be targeting African Americans or other people who come from social economic levels to actually get things done. So mandatory reporting is going to be key as far as shaping this type of legislation. There are some flaws in the legislation, though. The police right now, if you get arrested, you can request your file on hate crimes. Like if they're investigating you on hate crimes or they have some data on. If you get arrested. If you're not arrested and you ask for, hey, does the government have a file on me? They don't have to give it to you. That's one of the things I plan on fixing next year with the legislation. So it kind of goes along with, this can go into House Bill 838. The
Yeah,
bill
we could. Yeah.
in many ways that it passed hastily, but there's still some flaws that need to be worked out.
All right, let's talk about it. Let's get into 838.
838 is a bill that, as you were saying before, really seeks more to protect the police than it seeks to protect the general public. And the reason why I say that is because it does pretty much 3 things. It gives police officers a private right of action if there's a abridgment of their civil rights in the course of their duties. That's one. It also allows peace officers to bring suits against individuals who knowingly file a false complaint against them. That's 2. And then under the rule of lenity, and this is where it gets really interesting, it may actually lower the protections for police officers by saying if you commit certain types of crimes or acts, then they'll get a smaller sentence than a bigger sentence. And I can explain that later on.
Yeah, now, can we explain that now, though? Because I think that would be actually helpful.
Let me go in order. The
Okay.
private right of action by police officers. So it says in the bill in 838 that if you somehow abridge a police officer's right of action or a peace officer's right of action under a civil rights claim, then they can sue. They can bring a private suit. Here's the thing about this, and this is where it goes into legislative construction and everything else. Georgia is one of 3 states that does not have a civil rights law. Remember what we just talked about? Georgia was one of 4 states that does not have a hate crimes law.
Right.
Georgia is one of 3 states that does not have an omnibus civil rights law. There are protections everywhere in the code, but really, when it really comes down to it, the way the bill is written, it says if your civil rights are abridged. Well, it doesn't define civil rights, and you don't have another place in the code that says you have civil rights protections. So you can basically say that law is pretty much ambiguous and vague. And I don't even think judges, and let me not speak to them, but they probably would not uphold it. They might just strike that section altogether because they're saying, what was the legislature trying to mean when they actually brought this up into their purview?
Okay.
I can go on to the next part too.
Yeah, let's go to the next part of that.
Let's see. You got me on screen.
Yeah. So yeah, I got it. I'm gonna unstop the screen share so you can look at it.
I pulled it up on my.
Yeah. I unshared it so you could share it if you needed to.
So these are just talking points that I have, just to make sure that I get everything right, because I want to make sure your listeners have the best information.
Right.
It also allows peace officers to bring suits for damages against individuals who knowingly file a false complaint. So under current state law, you really have that already action. If I say you committed a crime
Hmm.
and I tell everybody that you or accuse you of committing a crime that you didn't do, you can come back and sue me as far as slander and defamation lawsuits currently under Georgia law. This law is pretty scary because, like I said, the element is accusing you of committing a crime, right?
Hmm.
Of false reports of crimes. You can
Right.
do it.
Right.
This changes it and lowers the bar of saying, instead of me false reporting a crime of a police officer, this could be just a simple complaint against a police officer.
Right. I saw that too.
So yeah, so if you just file a complaint and say this police officer said a derogatory term or did something that may not actually be under a crime, but is unbecoming of a police officer altogether, you could actually be sued by that police officer. Like, these are scary things that actually chill speech, especially in the time when we're seeing that police officers are not living up to their duties to serve the public. So that's the other thing. This 838 has a chilling effect on your free speech to petition the government and to also hold police accountable. And go
No,
ahead.
no. I was looking at because the ACLU actually released a statement. I guess it's also, and I guess it may have came out of your office. Um, One of the things they actually mentioned I thought was interesting too, which is to what you're saying, which is they mentioned something I think a lot of people are slowly wrapping their heads around, which is this notion of, especially in the wake of the Rashard Brooks killing here in Atlanta, which is this notion of officers essentially being able to now sue victims of the crimes that they commit, right? And so, or trying to seek damages from the victims that they commit. And I think the ACLU statement I put in the link, and they kind of pretty much state a pretty good case as to why this law should be struck down. And they also cited another incident in Philadelphia. I'm sorry, in Pennsylvania, where a black man in particular, called the police Nazis, and then he himself, the black man calling them the Nazis, was charged with a hate crime. And so they use two pretty good examples on the ACLU's official statement as to why this is a bad idea, in particular for Georgia, to back up what you were saying.
You're talking about the hate crimes, or you're talking about this?
The 838.
The 838, right.
Yes.
So yeah, I mean, there are several things that are happening, but this goes into the rule of lenity, where basically it's a rule of thumb, and Georgia case law establishes that different punishments for the same offense, if the ambiguity is resolved in favor of the defendant, who will receive a lesser punishment. So the best way to explain this is really giving an example. Aggravated assault is one of the crimes where, under Georgia law, it's you get a mandatory minimum on it, but for police officers, it's a higher tier for it. So I forgot the levels to it. I think for police officers, it's like a mandatory 10 to 20 range.
Mm-hmm.
So aggravated assault, the elements and the evidence to prove that you had aggravated assault or battery against a police officer could also be the same ones that could be used against a bias motivated intimidation charge, which is what House Bill 838 does. It establishes a new crime of bias motivated intimidation. So if you have the same elements for the same crime, and you have the same evidence to show that you committed the same crime, if those two are done, aggravated assault and racial and bias motivated intimidation, one, again, carried a mandatory minimum of 10 years. Bias motivated intimidation under 838 only carries 1 to 5 years. The rule of lenity says that in ambiguity, you have to go with the crime that has the lesser sentence. Basically, the runner gets in a tie, the runner gets it.
Right.
Things that have to deal with those type of situations, dealing with aggravated assaults, theft, robbery, damage, those could all come under the rule of lenity, which is not what I think the legislature expected to come out about this, but they rushed through this bill, and it's a poorly drafted bill that Governor Kemp should veto.
Okay. I'm not going to ask you whether or not he will, because I don't think that's the right question. The next thing I do want to ask you, though, is that what else have people missed from this last session, at least from your perspective as somebody who works with the ACLU, that people should be aware of?
I think that House Bill 1114.
Okay, what's that?
That is a postpartum Medicaid bill.
Okay.
So right now, women get 2 months off of Medicaid funding to take care of their children. Under House Bill 1114, which did pass, it takes that 2 months and you get expanded to 6 months altogether, as long as the budget allows for it. So this is a huge victory for women in the state of Georgia, especially Black women, who we know are the most vulnerable when it comes to post-mortem mortality. So hopefully they can get the right funding to not only take care of their children, to take care of themselves as well when it comes to healthcare and everything else. That's one of the biggest things.
Okay.
Bill 318 is another big one.
Mm-hmm.
The campus free speech bill.
I'm glad you brought that up. Okay, I'm glad you brought that up.
Come on, let's get the questions going.
Let's go. No, 318. Let people know about that.
It's a free speech campus bill. And the reason why I'm interested in SB 318 is because 2 years ago, I also fought SB 318 against Senator Ligon. And I specifically remember telling him, if you pass this bill, we're going to come right back here in next legislatures to try to correct it. Lo and behold, 2 years later, and Senator Ligon, this is his last year of being a legislator, we had to come back and we had to fix the same exact problems I said you would have to fix 2 years ago. So 318 was a good bill to try to fix those type of problems that were happening. However, it did not pass. And one of the reasons why it did not pass is because they put in what you would call a poison pill into the bill.
Okay, what's a poison pill?
A poison pill is basically finding a good bill, but then you add in a section or language that basically makes it a really bad bill. So it kills it, like it's poison. It kills the bill. So in this one, the poison pill was, it would have precluded universities from withholding funding to student organizations that have practiced discrimination or hate.
So what does that mean?
So in practice, it would be, if Georgia State University, if there was a student organization that was not letting in someone because of their race, sexual orientation, or something else, then the university can withhold funds, student fees, to that organization. Because otherwise, if they were giving them funds, it would have seemed like the university is promoting hate altogether. This bill, SB 318, would have allowed universities to do that. Once that happened, said, hey, I don't care what fixes you're making, that is a poison pill, and I cannot go forward promoting this bill anymore. So we still have sort of the problems that need to be fixed within free speech on college campuses, but it did not pass this year because of that poison pill.
Okay, and so I'm going to add in, these are not your words in particular, or the ACLU's. It's in my opinion that the free speech bill has been pushed a lot over the last few years, in particular by certain organizations like Turning Point USA or people such as Charlie Kirk and some more incendiary people on the right, as a way to solidify their ability to come on campuses and to essentially use these platforms as a way to give out not only rhetoric, but also as a way to recruit younger members into their causes. And this is not your words, not the ACLU's, but mine. And there's been a push across the country into this space. And I think it's in stark contrast to what the actual movement of young people seems to be on the streets. We can literally see each and every day where the young people are. And that type of bill, I'm surprised that it even got that far. But like you said, it was a poison pill attached to it. And so we'll see what happens next year, because next year is only like 6 months away at this point. So that brings me to the next thing. What's another bill or something that people may have missed from this last legislative session?
It would be Senate Bill, I believe, 463.
Okay.
Senate Bill 463 was originally an elections bill by the Secretary of State.
Okay.
It depends on who you were talking to about, like, if it was good or bad. I've been in conversations with the Secretary of State's office to have the bill changed. And the reason why I wanted it changed was because I wanted to strip all the bad stuff out. Let's get in something that's non-controversial, which is what you've seen that's happened in Fulton and Cherokee, all across the state, really. It didn't just happen in Fulton. There was a lack of poll workers in certain areas, which made into longer lines, more problems, more people not being able to vote. So currently under Georgia law, and still is under Georgia law, for you to be a poll worker, you have to live within that county. You can only be a poll worker within your county, or you have to be employed by the county to be a poll worker there. I was going to put in a law to repeal that statute of saying, if you lived in DeKalb, but your church was doing poll worker duties or adopting a precinct in Clayton County, and you wanted to be a poll worker in Clayton County, then you could do it. Because under the current law, you wouldn't be able to do something like that. Also, you only have to be 16 years old to be a poll worker.
Okay.
Even though the average age of a poll worker in the state of Georgia is 72.
Wow. Okay.
Right. So my goal, and this will be released probably after 4th of July if I get a vacation, we're going to do a poll worker recruitment program where we're going to recruit as many people as possible to become poll workers. So one, you get a younger group of people who are not as susceptible to COVID-19 as the elderly, which is, if the average age is 72, then they shouldn't be out there in the first place.
Right.
Also, I'm going to have it so civic organizations like Alpha Phi Alpha Fraternity Incorporated, in fact, I have a call after this, can adopt polling precincts, saying they will staff with poll workers, they'll hand out snacks, they will make sure that things run smoothly. Because a lot of people talk about voter suppression and election protection. You don't really need election protection and the lawyers on the back end if you solve the problem on the front end. It's kind of like this whole theory about Obamacare. Let's catch diseases and problems early, and then later on, people are healthier, so healthcare costs go down. Let's catch voting problems early, so you don't need election protection as much, and you don't need as many problems. You're not going to completely solve the system, but you're going to take away a lot of the things that could have been solved in the first place, as long as you have the competent people at the polls. So 426 was supposed to do that. It was also supposed to take down the age from 75 to 70, so you can actually cut the line. I recommended 65 because I think that's senior citizen age, but nobody listens to me.
Wait, okay, explain that part because people aren't going to know what you're talking about on that.
Oh, well, it's a simple concept. You're 75 years old, you see a long line in a polling booth. You can literally skip the line. It's just like skipping the line in the lunch line when you were a kid. Yeah, I'm a senior, you can't do it. So it's currently at 75. The bill that I put forth was, it would have turned it into 70, even though I wasn't at 65. But the Secretary of State put in a poison pill in that bill too, so that's why it didn't pass.
Okay, so I want to ask you in particular, if you cannot answer this on behalf of the ACLU, then I understand. Due to what the current secretary, this is not your words, these are my questions first and my comment. The question being, because we know what Georgia's most recent history is in regards to election, integrity, period. Were these things that were thrown in as a way to circumvent even having new legislation on the board, or was this something that was done with general intent to make elections better? If you can answer that, I understand. If you cannot, then don't.
I mean, I can answer anything, but I can't really speak for the motivations of the state's office or anybody else.
Okay, that's fair.
I can tell you that voter suppression does exist in the state of Georgia.
Okay.
We work hard to make sure that we overcome these types of things altogether.
Okay. And so that brings me to something else, which is a lot of people were concerned about that particular poison pill with the bill, because it seems as if now with that bill in particular, if it would have passed, it seems as if that bill would have essentially made it to where the Secretary of State is no longer going to be sending out absentee ballots to or even absentee ballot requests to people. Can you explain to people, is that going to happen again for the August runoffs or the big election in November? If it is or it isn't, so people can kind of know now where to go on how to go about voting.
Yeah, so the bill would forbid the Secretary of State's office to send out an absentee ballot request form, which is what everybody got almost
Right.
7. Right, the ballot request form to get a ballot. Since the bill did not, and honestly, the Secretary of State said himself that he's not going to do that again. So whatever. But it also forbid counties from doing that too. So counties like DeKalb County or
Hmm.
Fulton or anywhere else, we have a large population that is susceptible to COVID-19. You might want to send out a ballot request form just to say, hey guys, you don't have to come in, just send this in. Now let's be real. Georgia broke record numbers with the sending out ballot absentee request forms. There was a tremendous amount of outcry about people who were doing something. Fun fact, State Farm Arena is now going to be a polling place for the upcoming election. So I'm
Right.
going to be voting at the Hawks Center.
Not like that.
Um, but
Okay.
yeah, go ahead.
No, I'm listening.
So I got off track because I was talking about the Hawks. But what I think that's going to happen in the future is, again, if we have a poll worker program where you get younger people to poll these polling precincts, and we have these civic organizations who do care about voting, adopting polling precincts, we're going to have a much smoother November presidential election, which Georgia's in play because it's a battleground state.
Right. That's going to be a whole nother conversation. We're not even going to get into that this time. One of the things I do want to bring up too, in particular, there was something that popped up in the social feed, and maybe you can answer this, and it's related to one particular bill. And correct me if I get the bill wrong, but there was something that popped up on the social feeds that said that there would be new changes to a law that if an officer were to be assaulted or killed, that there would be a lesser amount of time. Could you explain that? Because maybe I've gotten that wrong, and I want to know if you can let
So
me know about that.
that's kind of what I talked about with House Bill 838.
Okay.
That's more of a theory that goes along with the rule of lenity. So if you, under this rule and theory, if you committed murder against a police officer, normally
Mm-hmm.
you kill a police officer is because they're a police officer and they're pursuing you, right?
Right.
Malice aforethought and everything else. If all of the elements are showing the same thing, if the evidence that is used are showing the same elements, if the elements and the evidence is showing
Gotcha.
things that prove malice afterthought for murder,
Mm-hmm.
also the same that shows bias motivated intimidation, then technically under the rule of lenity, same thing, same pieces of evidence, two different crimes, you're supposed to go to the crime that has the lesser sentence. Now, in
Gotcha.
practice, that may not work because prosecutors have way too much power and maneuvering power, and so do judges. But in theory, in case law, a defense attorney really could make a very creative argument of saying the rule of lenity applies. And it's not just, again, for murder, but aggravated assault or certain other things that could take place.
Okay. And another thing I want to ask is there was something you were either you or the ACLU were against, but correct me if I'm wrong, I guess, which was Senate Bill 402 about signature bonds. Can you explain what that was about?
Oh, that's Senate Bill 402.
Yeah.
Okay. And let me start off by saying that your previous Governor Nathan Deal, had about 7 years of criminal justice reform, has
Mm-hmm.
saved the states millions of dollars while also increasing public safety. So make sure we're right about this. Less money is being spent on the system. Less people are going into the system. More people are being let out of the correctional system. And public safety has been going up. These are just data. You can't really argue with this at all. It's a fact. While you're making these criminal justice reforms, under this bill, Senate Bill 402, it would have taken away one of the critical pieces of it, which is taking away unsecured bonds. So right now you have 3 types of ways that you can get released. An ROR, which means that you're released on your own recognizance. Basically, you're just, hey, you committed a crime. I'll see you during when it's time to come back to court. Secured bonds, which means that you put up collateral such as your house or money. It's kind of like getting bail, saying, hey, I put up this money for this. And an unsecured bond, which is pretty much more of a signature bond of saying, I'm going to sign out right now, but I am also going to put up a financial situation where if you don't show up, you will be fined this amount. That's good. Senate Bill 402 takes out that last option. So now you can either be released on your own recognizance or you can get bailed out if you pay enough money. The problem with that is judges are going to go with the latter because now they don't have another choice of saying, well, you're released on your own recognizance. You don't have a skin in the game. So I'm going to make sure that you either stay in jail or you have to pay money to get out. So that's going to increase the amount of people who are going to be in jail because judges are forced in that type of situation to make those type of decisions of saying, we want to keep people in the game. Really, when it comes down to it, a judge should either determine you are a danger to society or not. And that's why you need to figure out, should you get out on bail or not? Money should have absolutely no bearing on should you be in jail or not in jail. It comes from a classic system, more of a capitalistic, I have money so I can just pay my way through problems.
Okay. And so some people are going to ask, I'm going to ask you the same thing. Does this have anything to do with two groups of people, one particular? Does this have anything to do with people in particular who represent either the bail industry, like the bail bonds industry, or does this have to do with anything with like the ongoing reforms that people are trying to see in regards to prisons and jails in particular?
I would say both.
Okay.
If you did not have a bail industry, the bail industry has been pushing against these reforms since I've been down there, and they're going to continue to do it. But just know that they're not doing this in your best interest. They're doing it in their best interest, which is the bail industry is a multi-billion-dollar entity, literally. Why? Because they take your money based off of crimes that you probably shouldn't even be in jail for in the first place. So they know that they're going to fight tooth and nail to keep their industry alive. And unless they make some changes, then or get some wins, then they will actually go under, which is something I prefer. So for prison reformists and stuff like that, I think they were working to kill the bill instead of promoting it.
Got you. And so I want to take a quick segue, but before we do, it's going to be in regards to what you said before about prison reform. Is there anything else you want people to know legislatively that they should know or that they may have missed?
Oh, man. I mean, you're talking about for this session?
Yes.
Citizens arrest was not done this session.
Okay.
Citizens arrest statute was basically what the McMichaels were arguing during their case when they killed Ahmaud Arbery. They were just saying that they were trying to do a citizen's arrest. One, that's just dumb because Ahmaud Arbery did not break any type of crime at all.
Right.
Two, even if he did break a crime, which again he did not, a citizen's arrest, you're not supposed to be using deadly force like that. Well, one, if he did break a crime, it would be trespassing, but he didn't even trespass at all. But he and they thought that he trespassed. You're not supposed to pursue somebody who does something like that. You're only supposed to pursue if it's a felony.
Gotcha.
I think Georgia's only had like 5 other citizen arrest times that they've actually used it. And it's typically done for white people against black people. There's a difference between that and shopkeeper's rule and everything else. So you might want to look into repealing citizens arrest, use of force statute as well, which Georgia has its own standards ground. And again, voting, racial justice, women's rights. I mean, there's several. This was crazy though. So there's only so much that can get done.
Right. And so now I want to ask you in particular, which is, if you could speak to a little bit, which is something I think I'm doing an article on this and it'll probably be out later on this week, but people are still trying to wrap their heads around a couple of topics, one of which is prison reform, as well as police officer reform, right? So those are two different things, but they intertwine. So do you have anything you can speak to both of those about? Because sometimes people may be a little bit confused as to what reform means for either one.
So prison reform and what was the other one?
Police reform.
Okay. That's good. First, I want to say reform is within the eyes of the beholder.
Gotcha. Okay.
Most people think that it's like a progressive, liberating type of thing. No, reform still goes along with you can have harsher on crime issues.
Hmm.
So prison reform is on a spectrum, just like police reform, on a spectrum of things of how you view the prison system.
Okay.
So prison reform would be on more of a, let's say you're doing a more progressive thing. Prison reform would be kind of to, you have the status quo. Prison reform would be to the right of that and say, now we're going to do changes as far as who should be in jail and who should not be in jail. And that's mostly people who truly believe, and I believe this too, if you're not a danger to society, you should not be in jail or prison.
Right.
Do other things such as if you commit a crime, you can be under house arrest and still work from home like everybody else has been doing. And you just get limited in what you can and can't do. That decreases the amount of people who are in jails and their exposure to COVID-19. Also allows them to still continue on with their jobs, but you can limit who they talk to, how they talk. They're on prison, they're on a house arrest. You can limit all that stuff. And it really alleviates taxes for money that's going to there. Now that's one portion compared to prison abolitionists who just don't believe in prison at all.
Right.
And so you just need to get away with them altogether. That's an interesting way of doing it.
Right. And I'm going to talk to somebody who is a prison abolitionist soon. So I don't want you to have to speak for that person in particular. So the other one, though, is this issue of police reform, abolishing the police, or defunding the police. And so those are three different things. And I think people are having a hard time wrapping their head around what that even means.
I would go with Rayshard Brooks, and the analogy I've been pretty much giving and the example of it really deals with his death. So I see this more into a law enforcement versus public safety scenario. And this is where it goes into all the other catapults of defunding the police or anything else. Law enforcement would say that you would call on the police to come out there and suspect this individual of being under the influence while he's behind the car. So even though he may be behind the car, he's not moving the car, keys are not even in the car, he could be charged with a DUI, which is why they asked them to step out of the vehicle, put your hands behind your back. A scuffle ensues, and he runs off, and he gets shot in the back. He dies. Not only does he die, those two other police officers, their lives are ruined. I'm not saying I have sympathy for them or not, but when it comes down to it, the second scenario of public safety, where same scenario, an individual is allegedly under the influence and is parked behind the car, and a police officer or someone from the community comes up to him and says, "Sir, you are clearly not in the condition to drive a vehicle safely. Can I call someone to pick you up? Can I call you a Lyft? Can I call you Uber? Can I take you home to your 4 children and your wife?" Rayshard Brooks could go back to his children and his family, and those 2 police officers can be on the beat trying to save somebody else's life. 2 different theories. One is what I would put up as the best way that we need to really focus on things, public safety. And it's not to say that Rayshard Brooks would get off or anybody else. You could talk about a fine or doing some sort of community service or going through alleged DUI classes to solve this type of issue. You could do all that while he's still alive, compared to law enforcement who say you broke the law and now the only recourse is going to jail. So that goes along with maybe we need to defund the police or divest in the police. And a divestment would basically mean instead of having so many police officers on there, let's have a social worker who can come out and talk to people and say, what is your issue? And how can I solve this issue and help you out within it? Because police officers really, in my opinion, should be the last recourse when it comes to things. If you had a suicide attempt, let's have a therapist come out there and talk to this individual instead of having the police officer who may pull a gun on the individual. So it's those type of theories that people are starting to wake up to of saying, are we really just concerned about obeying the law, or are we concerned about public safety? Because you can have 2 completely different outcomes, as I just exemplified with Rayshard Brooks.
That was actually a really, really good explanation. I think most people will get that at this point, because a lot of people, I get a lot of messages daily about the things that we're talking about now. So I'm glad that you're here to give some clarity to that. One of the other issues, though, is this notion of, and if you can't speak to this necessarily, then we can move on as well, which is just this notion of abolishing the police altogether. Um, so right now, the only place in the U.S. that has done that is Camden, New Jersey, and their reason for completely abolishing their police department was for just really bad policing, police brutality, corruption within the department, things that you see time and time again when it comes to police reform. They took the step in 2013 to abolish the police department completely. They did bring back the police department, but it was in a much different fashion than it is today, with the focus on what you're kind of saying, which is they do have certain things that are solely for policing and the things that are for public safety. And so crime has been down in Camden. Not to say crime is like non-existent, but the social service end is what people are drawing from nationally. Do you think that something like that could happen in Atlanta or DeKalb or Fulton or somewhere else in the state of Georgia?
Or across the nation? Yes, I
Right.
truly can have a. The problem goes back into what we really come from, and it's this. We're dealing with COVID-19. We're
Hmm.
also on COVID-16-19, as most people say. So yeah,
Okay.
the police departments and other things, those people who were being out there, those were sheriffs that were actually rounding up runaway slaves. Those were people who were paid for by state and tax dollars to monitor and keep order against slaves altogether, keeping them down. I brought up the citizens arrest law because the citizens arrest law was passed in 1866, a year after the Civil War. And the reason why it was passed was because they wanted a way to arrest former slaves, put them in the system, and then put them right back on the plantation as far as working. The slave owner now pays a little bit of money towards the state as far as getting free work done, and also gets off because beforehand, slave owners had to take care of their slaves. It was in their best interest. Under the new system, they didn't even have to take care of their slaves. They were like, well, you're not my slave, so I don't have to worry about it. You figure out how to take care of your family.
Right. And I know for some people this may seem, what Bruce is saying is very much either in either in defiance of what you believe about law enforcement, or you might want to chalk that up, but he's not pulling your leg on this one. And I'm going to have two articles about this this week. One of which is the abbreviated history of the police, in which we have two divergent lines, one of which definitely includes what Mr. Bruce is saying, which is the entire history of, we know it from the sheriff's department to even just the star on the sheriff's badge itself comes from slavery. This is not a debate. It does come from chattel slavery. And then this other notion as well, a longer article about what it means to defund or abolish or divest from the police. And so both of these will be articles. If you're a newsletter member, you'll get these first before everyone else. And so I just want you guys to be aware of that as well. And so one other thing I want to bring up too, because I know it's getting late, you have to get out of here, Bruce, which is a lot of people right now are still getting a lot of information, and people are really, really just inundated with things. They don't know what to believe or where to see or where to go and get good information. Like, where could you tell them to get good information?
ACLU of Georgia.org.
Okay.
I try to post more things on my Facebook page to let people be aware of it. I'm not a marketer, so I don't want to be
Right.
one.
We're going to do a weekly show. We're going to get that together.
Yeah,
King Bruce or something. I don't know. We'll figure it out. So,
best thing to do.
yeah. One other thing is, right now, is there anything that you want to bring up about yourself or the ACLU that you haven't brought up so far that you want people to know about?
I got into this game based off of a phone call, based off of just I wanted to do something. So I really merged my JD with what I thought was civil justice. And I said I could just go ahead and represent protesters for free. And now I'm still doing that by legal observing and protecting protesters. What I'm saying is everybody's trying to find their mark in the movement. It's not hard, and you don't have to be the person out front leading the crowd. In fact, I'm not the person out front leading the crowd. I'm normally the one in the middle or behind everyone, making sure that everybody can do what they need to do. So if you need any help finding what you consider as your mark, just let me know. Like what you're doing right now, King. getting this information out to people and to the masses is critical. That's exactly what we need at this time. Now
Right.
we need the masses to do something about it.
Okay. And one thing I always end all my podcast episodes with people, which is, what's making you happy today?
My Hawks Cup.
All right,
And,
there we go.
yeah. And the fact that State Farm Arena will be a voting precinct. Like, you can't beat that.
Nah, that's good. I'm with you.
4. Yeah.
So, okay. And so, with that said, I have all the links in the show notes to this. If you are a newsletter member, you have a great week of things coming up. I want to give a shout out to my new editor who's going to be working with me she's worked with me on a few things already, but starting July 1st, you guys will get to know her a lot more. Her name is Alicia Bruce. She'll be helping me out with some of the articles, especially the longer form ones. And so the newsletter will have a couple things. You'll have more podcast episodes before. You have a lot of archived articles from before, as well as the updates that people really, really love about just what's going on in news and information. So once again, you all, thank you so much for listening. And I want to give a special shout out to my parents' organization, Jazz Matters Atlanta, which is going to be doing a virtual concert on tomorrow. And if you happen to miss it or you listen to this podcast later on, check them out on all social media channels at Jazz Matters ATL, or you can visit their website, yesjazzmatters.org. They're going to be doing a virtual concert led by my father, just playing different jazz music with different jazz musicians. And I also have a link to them as well. All right. Once again, thanks for Bruce. If you like Bruce, you want to get in contact with him, make sure you reach out to him at the ACLU of Georgia, which is, I believe, ACLUGA.org. Is that correct?
Yeah. Or just follow Deuce Bruce too, or Christopher Deuce Bruce.
I'll put his socials for you all to follow him as well. Once again, thanks for Bruce coming out today. And once again, you listen to the Neighborhood Watch podcast. I am your host, King Williams. And if you haven't already, please sign up for my newsletter at iamkingwilliams.substack. That's SUBSTACK. Again, SUBSTACK.com. Once again, thank you, Bruce, for coming out.
Stay black, brother.
All right.
All right.